welcome back, everyone. That week went quick. I feel like that week has gone really quick. I don't know, but there we go. Hope everyone's had a good week anyway. Enjoying the Rugby World Cup. I've enjoyed quite a few games actually. I've had a few hall passes to watch to watch a few, which has been great. It's great to see that Wales are absolutely dominant in the game still, which is for anyone who
World
watched
class.
that game, world class for a good 10-15 minutes or so. It's great to see. But no, I hope your nearest your national countries as well as your adopted nations are doing well in the tournament. I think it's been good. Cool. This is the second part of this project and overview, and we're going to unpack more. I think the last session was a lot of the history around ISO 27001 to contextualize what's got us to this point. And yeah, we should be able to highlight. I've had an insight, and we should be able to highlight the actual changes themselves and answer some of the queries that we received through the form. So thanks for everyone who contributed to that. It does help shape the session and avoid any criticism after, because you've had the opportunity to to shape it to what you need. Bevan, I'm going to pass over to you, sir, and to kick into it. We are 8 minutes into the 45, so consider that with your timings, okay, mate? But yeah, enjoy, guys. I'll be monitoring the chat, so post as and when you see fit.
Okay, guys. Yeah, I mean, your questions really showed just how much more you want to know and how much there is to talk about this topic. So that we're going to go through it quite quickly, with the understanding that we'll have to make a plan. If you do want to get more responses, more things from me, maybe we can have even a separate discussion outside of this alliances, or we have a third one with pod alliances to talk about. We did, as Lee said, bring in all the responses. So let's jump into the changes. I mean, some of the changes are very superficial, is the name. But the name change is actually quite interesting at the same time, because what it means is now this concept of information security, cybersecurity, and privacy are brought together into an ISMS. And I do think the older versions of 27001 was only a security standard with, one privacy control. There was maybe one on data privacy and one additional one which sort of talked about records management. So the new standard is trying a lot more to bring it together. However, the controls haven't changed that much. We'll talk about that now. There's enough to bring privacy more to the fore, but then you've got the PIMS thing, which we're not going to unfortunately have enough time to talk about today. I've got about 5 of you asking me to tell you much more about PIMS. That definitely is a separate topic, but you can bring it together a lot easier. So either you do a lot more effort in terms of your 27001 implementation in terms of privacy as well, using existing controls, or you go and use PIMS and you say, all right, well, let's add on PIMS so we can have a pure, proper sort of privacy control. Okay, so, but the other aspect is the cybersecurity. So they've brought into the concept that cybersecurity is also a topic that must now come into an ISMS. And that's a critical thing in terms of the new technologies, in terms of what they're trying to do. So NIST obviously very strongly cybersecurity for, and that's why the combination of the two brings together that. Okay, they've taken away that old name code of practice, which was there right from the beginning. So that is quite an interesting thing to understand why and how they did it. So the clauses, some of them have gotten very small updates, but just want to stress that remember the clauses are critical. If you do want to get ISO certified, this is how you get certified, through clauses. Clauses are the things that are mandatory and they're not negotiable. Those controls in Annex A are something that you use in order to apply the clauses. So the first couple is the naming stuff. And obviously we're going to share the presentation. You can go and read this in more detail. They've got links to a new browsing platform where you've got definitions. That's pretty cool for most of us. If you want to know what the official definition is of cybersecurity, what the official definition is of privacy or confidentiality, you now have a terminology database you can go to. So an IC Electropedia. They've changed a few words in the necessitation of interested parties, and they've changed a few words in ISMS. The thing there, if you look at the boldface for the ISMS, they've talked about and their interactions. So the standard itself has done a lot of trying to bring to the fore suppliers, supply management, third-party risk, and you guys know third-party risk is something we talk about a lot. Third-party risk, supply management, and then on top of that, additional stuff like cloud, which we talk about just now. Okay, so it's coming more and more and more, but also it's also bringing together different standards, and we spoke about that last week. 9001, 20,000, 22301, business continuity, all those standards. By saying in the interactions that a lot of companies now are getting certified in more than one thing. We've got a client call center that's looking at 5 certifications together because of pressure from the airline specifically. Okay, so that's what that is about, and that's critical to understand that the cleverly bringing together one management system is what that interactions is talking about. Okay, and the organization stuff, they spoke a lot more about communication. And we know when we do a presentation to anybody, we always stress the value of communication. And obviously, when we're doing our own things, we want to improve our communication. So they're talking about how you communicate as leadership, but also to whom you need to be communicating to, because there was a gap in the standard in terms of how and to who, because it was quite a general comment about leadership. So stressing more about everybody within the ISMS needs to be communicated to, but obviously the company in terms of security as well. Okay, and it's not such a big one. I think you should have been doing this properly, but maybe now you've got a little bit more guidance in terms of leadership. The next slide is where it gets into a bit more of the detail. The security risk treatment one talks about the fact in the old standard, 2013 and before, they spoke a lot about using Annex A for risks, and for everything really. For when you've done your risk assessment, then you must go and implement it and go to Annex A. The new standard is giving you an option to use any controls. And 2005 and 2013 did actually talk about that. They did talk about you can use other controls, but I remember in 2005 it was very specific to always talk only about Annex A. And in 2013 they sort of opened the door a little bit. But in 2022 they're saying to you, well, you can use any comprehensive list of controls. So you can go to COBIT, you can go to NIST, you can go anywhere. PCR is a good example. You want to get PCR certified and you decide only to use the PCR's controls. That would be quite an interesting experiment to go, well, am I missing anything if I only use the PCR controls? But if you can show through risk assessment and through controls thing that you actually, that's an effective and well done control way of doing it, you can justify it. Okay, that's would be quite fun to try, because I think you could do that quite well, for example. So you don't have to use the controls in 27001. You can go somewhere else, and that's very important for all of you to think about as well. If you don't, though, it might be harder, it might be more effort. That's why we do still recommend
Bevan, we do have a
always think
question.
first about those controls.
Sorry to cut across you. The question is, if a company's already implemented the 2013 standard, how long should they budget for moving to the 2022 standard?
It depends on the size of the company, as always. It's always a depends answer, isn't it? But if it's a medium-sized company with hundreds of employees to thousands of employees, you probably can get it done, because I'll show you now, you've got 11 new controls that you can need to spend a lot of effort on. But the other controls are more of a modification, editing, changing the order. So we're doing one right now with a company with a couple hundred people, and it's a 3-month project, to give you an example, of sitting together and actually just getting them over the line, helping them with the management system. So I would say 3 to 6 months, you can get across the line, unless there's something that you've got to now implement a big project because you're missing something. Like, say you want to go down the road of doing a high threat management, a threat monitoring and threat sort of assessment project. That might take longer. So again, do it quickly, do it cleverly, and then try and improve it afterwards is always one of the questions that I was going to tell you about in terms of doing this, getting it over the line and doing it pragmatically. So pragmatically, 3 to 6 months. If you want to go into a big project to change your technology, update things, then you could be up to a year.
Cool. Thank you,
Okay,
mate.
cool. All right. Now, the security objectives is the other one to understand. This is a huge gap for many clients when we go and help them, is where they haven't actually got security objectives. They haven't implemented security objectives. And then very much they're not monitoring and updating their security objectives. So I recommend all of you, whether or not you want an ISMS or not, to go back and to start again with your security strategy by looking at what your objectives are. And obviously the best objectives align to business and align to risk. But according to the ISMS, you need to have very established security objectives, and you need to monitor and actually, measure how well you're doing against those objectives. And the really nice ISMSs we see is where they're setting up metrics at a lower level, and those metrics then feed up into specific objectives. So you might have 10 metrics, and all those 10 metrics are all about security awareness, for example. And security awareness is one of your objectives. But that's another very long topic. Okay, I spoke about communication, monitoring, and measurement. They just give you more clarity. What is valid? They are talking about outsourcing a lot more in terms of planning and controlling. And then communication is where they're saying you've got to measure how well your communications are doing. So these are three things that we know, communication specifically and measurement, that we often are not very good at in terms of security and in terms of ISMSs. So how do you actually bring that all together? Okay, so like I said, go read that slide, but that's three summaries of what they are. I want to get into, these ones are the more interesting ones with the new and restructure clauses. So now there's a new clause on the planning of changes. So there used to be a clause they're talking about change management in the ISMS, but now they want to talk about, making sure that your clauses are set up with a schedule and that you are conducting them in a planned manner. I did think that this was already covered by change management in the previous standard, but some people obviously were doing it probably a little bit too informally. So they've now stressed the importance of that. So when you're changing your ISMS, your security structures, your security overall, security management function, you need to have change management for that as well. And I think a lot of times you were doing change management for operational reasons, but you weren't necessarily doing it for your ISMS. And that's why they're stressing that more to the fore in terms of change management. Okay. The management review is something also. You're supposed to have a management review every month, every quarter, where you talk about the effectiveness of your ISMS. I think the standard talks about 6 monthly being the bare minimum. So if you don't do a management review twice a year, you won't meet the requirements of an ISMS, but some people do it monthly, or some people do it quarterly as well. So the one thing there, again, the word changes. But what they want to bring to the fore is you need to understand the effect of your interested parties. And that does tie up to what was said in one of the other clauses as well. Who are the interested parties that are interested in what we do? So our shareholders are an obvious one. The media is an obvious one. But have those changes and have they changed the needs and expectations of those interested parties? And that's a nice one in terms of the South African environment, where you, not just South Africa, but the world environment, where your shareholders, because of the prevalence of cyber attacks, because of how much is happening in terms of privacy, how their needs and expectations are changing. And I do think your customers in terms of privacy are a really good example. 5 years ago, a lot of customers were not even really, it wasn't a thing that they were worried about at all. Now I think there's a huge proportion of our customers who are very worried about privacy and cyber breaches as they increase. Okay, so understanding that changes is something that also want you to look at. The order of improvement has changed, and I do think they were sort of saying a corrective action and then a non-conformity. Now they're saying find the issue and go and fix it, which I do think makes quite a lot more sense. Okay, so Yeah, we've got to have, you can't think of a better control than that, except obviously he got injured just after I put the picture in. So, of course, that's called irony. Okay, this picture, we got asked for a couple of pictures to show what the changes are. And the first one is the controls revamp, is the fact that this shows you quite nicely from effort, from what are major changes down to, what didn't make any changes. And the major changes are there's 11 new controls. The moderate ones is that took 57, they merged 57 controls and they split out one. Okay, that's pretty cool to know. So 57 of the controls have been merged and one has been split out, and we'll talk about that just now. They renamed 23 of them, but they didn't really change much on them. And then 35 of the controls stayed exactly the same. Okay, so the first thing is they took the controls, and I'll show you in the next picture, and moved them into 4 areas. And they put new controls in. So with the next picture, you'll see exactly what that change means. So this is my PCB picture. I put one PCB slide in because I asked permission, obviously, to use any of their stuff. But this one's very cool. So the new one has gone down to 4 areas, and the old one was 18 areas. Now, this is a challenge for implementers and auditors because the new structure takes away. So the human resources one is very nice because that's still under people controls. If you look here, you've got people controls. The physical environmental ones are under physical controls. Okay, so those two are still very similar. But these other ones, organizational and technology, they've taken all of these controls and split them into 2 sections. So for implementation and auditing, it can be quite a challenge in terms of now going, well, how do I do this in buckets? How do I bring this all together? So you'll find, say, 3 controls on access control there and say 2 in there. And some of them might not even be called that the access controls necessarily. You'll find something about contracts and supply management there. And then you'll find a technical one related to supply management here. Okay, so, but if you use that as the basis and you try and understand where controls are, you can still sort of go back to it and go, all right, well, let me just understand, where the supplier ones were. Development's a good one. There'll be 2 or 3 technical ones there and a couple that are not so technical there. Okay, so that's a cool picture. But if you look there, you'll see the number of controls. And you'll see that the people controls, I've got 8, and the physical controls, I've got 14. And the organizational have got 37, and technology have got 34. So most of the controls are in those 2, are in organizational and technical, and these are the areas very, very similar to what was there before. Okay, so use this picture if you want to explain to anybody about how the controls changed. There were 114, there's now 93, and 4 different areas instead of these 14 different areas. But most of those are still here. They just now reordered towards organizational and technological controls. So the key thing we'll talk about is merging, and merging is a picture of the Cats, which is a very ill-fated merging of a couple of rugby teams back in the early 2000s, where they took 2 strong teams and made them into one very weak team. And I do think when you look at merging, understand that just because something's merged doesn't mean the control goes away. And for example, you may not see a control anymore about reviewing access rights or something about key management because it's in a bit of detail in another control. So you could now have to go to 27002 and read the controls probably very carefully to make sure you're not missing anything. And I do see this as potentially an issue for a company that's doing this for the first time, is that they're going to read what the control says, but they're not going to read the edits underneath it where it talks specifically about, for example, key management. Okay, so for new companies doing this, be very aware of that. Don't just read what Annex A at a very superficial level. Understand that there is a lot under the hood, and it might be quite deep under the hood as well. And that's the one thing, unfortunately, with merging. So you're bringing together one control, you're bringing the three controls into one. And because of that, you might understand that privileged access management is actually a really important control, because it might be hidden in terms of a merge. Okay, and I think that's totally an issue in terms of auditing and in terms of implementation. And we've started doing our first 2022 audits a couple of months ago, and definitely have picked up that. People are not necessarily understanding that now what that merging actually means. And they also might understand that what the new controls are as well, but this sort of gives you a double thing to understand. Okay, so the new controls, there's 11 of them. And when you look at the naming, you'll see a lot of them are things which have come to the fore in the last 5 to 10 years. So threat intelligence, cloud security, this concept of ICT readiness for business continuity. You'll see there data masking, data leakage protection. Then the one I find quite funny is a web filtering one, because that's been around for a very long time. And now to bring it in as a new control, I'm not sure that for me is the one that I would not have really worried too much about, to be honest. But the rest are quite clear that there are things where technology's changed, or the way we do things, or they become more important. Configuration management is one that's been around in NIST for a very long time, and CIS have focused on it, but they've never really stressed it on endpoints specifically in ISO. It's been in other controls, and people have generally applied it, but it's never been configuration management. There's been its own control, own area as important as that. The cloud stuff, but I'll go into a bit more detail on them in the next slide. But I think the ones to understand that are the information deletion one is again about that whole life cycle. And the life cycle has also been alluded to in other controls. But again, a lot of people, especially in South Africa, never delete anything. And we do find that whenever we do audits of companies been around for quite a long time, we ask them about disposal and retention. And they say, well, we don't delete anything because we keep things forever just in case. And I do think that's a big point, which is why they've stressed it quite a bit. Okay, so a few more perceptions on new controls here. So you saw them in the previous one. The monitoring and physical monitoring one is interesting, because a lot of clients in the past we've seen, they basically have logs, they have cameras, and they only use it in case of an incident. So a lot of our call center customers, what they do is they have a camera, and then they look only at the camera when someone does steal something or when there is a complaint, and they don't have someone physically monitoring the cameras at all time. It's also a little bit different Europe to South Africa, where South Africans a lot more, I think, do monitor those cameras because of the amount of issues maybe we do have. But now they're saying that you need to actually have physical monitoring in place. You need to monitor, and not just physical monitoring, but also the logical monitoring as well. Again, because a lot of customers have got logs, but they only use it in case of an incident. So they don't actually monitor their logs and review their logs constantly. So they're bringing that to the fore, that you actually need to have a program and a principle in place where you are doing constant monitoring. Ideally, it's happening all the time rather than just doing it ad hoc. And in the 2005 sort of days, we were doing a lot of that. We were reviewing logs only on a monthly basis in hindsight. But now the whole reactive, proactive stuff is coming to the fore a lot more. Okay, which not just for logical, but also physical as well. That's a very big change for physical specifically. For a lot of companies who've been certified for a long time, have to take that into account. Okay, the next two technologies. The controls, the new standard is a lot stronger on telling you to do technologies or to find better manual ways of doing things. But to do DLP and web filtering manually, as we know, especially DLP, it's not going to work. It doesn't work very well. So they are talking a lot about implementing those controls and doing specific things on technologies. And I think the DLP and the web filtering and threat intelligence are very big controls of that. Okay. Threat intelligence, when we go into a customer who's been doing this for a long time and now they're going to do threat intelligence, a lot of them don't understand what it is. They might have been doing it in some way before, but now they need to understand what the concepts are and how to actually do threat intelligence. Again, it's going to be looked at in terms of your complexity of your company. You can do very simple threat intelligence, basically just subscribing to newsletters and reviewing things and trying to do something to improve how you pick up threats, all the way through to highly technology solutions with strong teams. Okay, so a lot of these controls will be that. I'll be looking at in terms of the complexity of the company and what you're actually trying to get out of it. They added in a new control on cloud, and then I made a little comment there. I think it was there in 2013 under supply management, but now they wanted a specific one on cloud. And I think a lot of security people were just unhappy that cloud wasn't in the previous control. And when I did training courses, we get people asking me almost every time, why is there no cloud control? Why is cloud not in here? And I always say, well, it's under supply management. And I get a lot of people rolling their eyes and say, oh, cloud's much more important than that. And I do think that's what happened during the debate about it. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I do think it's covered under supply management anyway, but now it's more to the fore. I spoke about configuration management. I spoke about masking and deletion. As we know, PCI pushed that a lot. And PCI has been having those masking data, deleting data, what the criticalities of it. The privacy legislation obviously focused on a lot as well. So now we've got specific controls on data masking and data deletion. The ICT readiness for business continuity. The interesting history. So again, because it was split out, business continuity, obviously there's a separate standard on business continuity, but this whole concept of cyber resilience comes to the fore. And we know it's a big concept for all of us. We're looking at cyber resilience, not just business continuity. And I think that's what that is. That's bringing cyber resilience back into it. And the training courses that we do have a whole section on this to say, what is IC readiness? What is cyber resilience? How do you actually do that? The last one is the secure coding. And I do think also this was in a control, but now they brought out more stronger. What secure coding is, not just principles, not just components of it. And this for us is almost all our clients battle with. Actually, how do you bring together what the ISMS wants together with what you're doing in terms of coding? And secure coding, is something where a lot of people need to really have a well-designed way that actually works with them instead of slowing them down through constant checklists and constant things. But secure coding is a big one for this. Okay. Any questions on controls? All right. Yeah, I said to Lee when I was putting together the updates that I was a little bit nasty about the Welsh last week, and obviously the Welsh have proved themselves this week. They're going to be world champions after that display. And I'll try to find a picture of Tom Jones in a Welsh rugby jersey, but he's too cool for that. So, but at least he handed out the rugby jerseys once. And, really the standard, when I read what other people say about the changes, they seem to be saying, well, it's not a big deal. The changes are small, but they've brought in newer things. They've sorted out duplication. They've tried to look at more current cybersecurity requirements, and it's not difficult if you understand the changes. I think the answer is between the two. I don't think you need to be terrified. It's not a major change. It looks like a big change, but it isn't actually such a big change. However, it's also not that small a change. It's enough that you do need to, and that's why they question about how long to do it is. You're not going to do it overnight. There is some effort involved to it. However, it's not massive either. It's not like you need to go out and sign up a massive consulting firm to spend a year doing this for you. It's more of a logical approach, with a little bit of intelligence, somebody giving you guidance and helping you, but not necessarily someone saying, well, we need to redo everything again. It's not that big a change except for the way it looks. But again, it's also not that small either. Okay, so I do think that's important to think through. So what they're saying in terms of the transition approach is that it is a 3-year thing. So standard was published in 2022 in February. Q4, it was then sort of came out officially. 27,001, 27,002 came earlier than 27,001. So from Q4 2022, you have a 3-year period. So now we're almost in Q4 2023. It's crazy. I think we're end of Q3 2022 already. So you're in the first year already of that process. And they're saying by Q4 2022, then there'll be no new 2013 standards. So if you want to still do 2013, you've got until the end of next year. After that, then you've got a year left until the end of the transition period. So most people that are using 2022 should be into their transition. Probably a lot of our clients decided to go 2013 for one more year and then to start 2022 next year. You should either have started already or be starting it next year, because that gives you enough time to transition over. And as we did discuss with how much effort and how much work it is, if you are starting now, you should have more than enough time. It shouldn't take you 2 years to do this. But it also depends on the complexity of your company and just how hard it is for people to make those changes. Okay, but it gives you a pretty good idea, I think, that picture in terms of the timelines. Most of our customers are new ones are immediately going to 2022, and the ones that have been doing this for a while are started a project now to migrate across. Okay, so this is our picture. I'm looking at our timing, all these delays and stops and things, but this is the pragmatic sort of approach to, I like the picture gives you, we drew this picture up based on, I think, 3 or 4 other ones approaches and try to say how we would do it. But there are certain steps at the beginning where you need to get sign off, draw up business cases, actually get sort of an understanding of how you're going to do it. Then the first part is, what are we actually trying to do? What is our scope? What is our planning? How do we want to get certified? This gap analysis and recommendations thing, sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't. When it's a new company, they've got nothing. Sometimes the gap analysis is a bit of a waste of time. I don't always like gap analysis. I do find sometimes they're just easy way to make money, but they don't really add that much value to it. So if you've got a zero base, you don't have to do a gap analysis, or you can quickly do it, say it's a zero base. You've got to start from here. But for a very mature company, obviously, or a company that's relatively mature, this can be a very useful step. So once you've done that, you get the recommendations. Then you go into your documentations. New policy might be needed, or you need to make sure you've got a good policy, security policy document. Then you come up with your scope. The scope is a critical. So all of these here are the critical mandatory documents you need. A security policy, a scope document, a risk assessment, but how you do risk assessments and the approach, and then your risk treatment plan and risk owners. So that's now what you're going to do about your risks, and then your statement of applicability. Okay, and then the last one you see now are your controls, how you implement your controls, what you've done in terms of your control plans. Those are the critical documents. There are other documents which are mandatory too, policies, procedures, but these are the critical ones in terms of clauses. And the scope can include other areas that are also mandatory. The internal and external context, understanding the needs and requirements of other parties, those things. But those are the critical ones that you should have to get you started. But remember, one of the things to understand about an implementation is the importance of the risk assessment. And what happens after the risk assessment is you implement controls. You don't jump immediately into controls. That's where many people that don't understand the control mess it up literally. They jump in and implement controls, but they forget about these steps. Okay, so focus on these steps. Once you've done a good risk assessment, you understand your risk, you choose controls, based on the risk assessment and business objectives. It actually doesn't even stress business objective, it stresses risk. But I always align it to business objectives as well, but you always need to have a risk linking to the controls. Once you've implemented the controls, now this is obviously where the work comes in terms of your project. This might be 3 months, it might be 2 years, 5 years. I did it for Qatar Gas. Their project was a 4-year project to implement controls. When I did it for a small company in South Africa, we had a 2-month project to implement controls. So that gives you a very good idea. And that ties into some of the questions you guys have been asking us. The smallest client we've got that got certified had 3 people. So, and the biggest one we've done was Qatar Gas with, an Aramco size companies where we're talking hundreds of thousands of people. Okay, so it applies to every single company. I truly believe that you can apply it for every single company. We're doing it for our own company. We're 10, 11 people. We've seen it done for 3 people. It very much is applicable for any size company. And it is, if you're outside of, if you're in a bigger developed country, you will see that every company immediately, because of what they're doing, sees the value into, maybe doesn't see the value, but has to go through some sort of process of certification. It's critical in terms of doing business internationally now. And I see it as something which is no longer a nice to have for almost any company that deals with information security. Okay, and I do still see a lot of companies in South Africa that are aligning to the standard and not implementing the standard, holding out as long as possible. I think if you're working internationally, those days are gone. And that's why we are talking to companies with 3 people in South Africa who are getting certified because of what they do as a business. Once you've implemented it, then you have to do an internal audit. You fix the issues in your internal audit and you go for your certification audit. One of the things to know about certification is that it's a 3-year process, 3-year certification. Not like PCI, not like most of the other certifications. You only do a full audit every 3 years, but you do smaller audits, which are these surveillance audits, every year. Okay, so they will come in and just check that your ISMS is running. But those audits maybe are a 2-day audit or a 1-day audit instead of maybe a 3 or 5 or 10, 20-day audit for your main certification. Okay, one thing to know, you do need to do internal audits every single year. And obviously some companies have a strong internal audit function, others don't. So critical to make sure how best to do your internal audits as well. Okay, so that tries to bring together some of the steps to show you, and obviously there's project plans for each of these areas on how you would do it and more detail. It gives you a pretty good idea on how the process works. Okay, and I think I've touched on some of that. Which I mentioned it. Why do people get certified? Sometimes you just have no choice because you are in fintech and you've got all these requirements, you've got massive customers on you, you're being sent thousands of questionnaires every single week to fill out, which some of our customers are doing, and you've got no choice. And those two tie to the next two. The clients that we like the most are the people that are going to make more money from it. So we're a very good example. If we are not certified in ISO 27001 as a consulting firm working globally, you will lose clients. And if you are certified, you will be able to sell yourself above someone who isn't certified to make money. Okay, so those are the guys that we love doing the projects the most, people that buy in the most, they make more money from it, or they will lose if they don't get certified. And I've had a couple of customers phone me up and say, listen, we've got a sales guy doing a presentation in 2 months. He wants to sell it to a big bank. We need to be certified by then. Okay, and the same with the airlines, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, very important to understand that buying for it. Some of them makes them better at what they do. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's a tick box exercise, let's be honest. But hopefully most companies are trying to get better at what they're doing now when they do it. And then that one on security. Okay, yeah. Do use it to give structure. It gives you a lot of structure. It gives you a lot more in terms of process and setting things up properly. It's got a bad name from tick boxes like anything. if you are following a tick box and trying to get this done in a month, you're not doing it right. If you truly believe that you want to make yourself more secure and get better at what you're doing, you can do this thing for the right reasons. And we're busy doing a project in 2022, specifically trying to understand that as much as possible. How do we actually make ourselves more secure should be our number one driver, but all the other stuff is critical for us to integrate into this. Okay, and I think I answered most of these as we spoke about this. The second question was about, can you do this yourself? Can you get a lead implementer to sign us off for you? You can do this, obviously, but the effect is very limited. You always have a doubt from an external party when they see that you've got a self-signed off ISO certification. When we did the work for Shell, which was like 6 years of flying around the world doing audits for them, they had self-certified beforehand, an internal audit, and then they had already had that doubt. So even though they didn't go full certification, they got us in as auditors to do the audits for them, to give them another level before they went full certification. I think, honestly, I wouldn't say it's a waste of time, but it's very close to a waste of time to the self-certification. It really isn't. The cost now of certification is actually tiny compared to the implementation and the effort involved. So, and there were so many competitors out there now doing the audits for you that honestly, these audits are the least of your worry in terms of cost. So I would really think about just, sucking it up and getting certified, to be honest. It makes so much more sense. The pragmatic question, some of the more steps have said it, we're showing the steps above. Understand clauses 8 critical. There's my spelling mistake there, but understand, it as well as you can. Go and learn, get people to talk, logically think it through, but understand that the clauses are the critical steps. The controls are things which follow from the clauses, but they are critical. Don't waste time. Don't go down rabbit holes. Don't, try and do something so well that you actually, you're wasting months on a project where you could just tick a box and get something in effectively without necessarily trying to make it perfect. And a lot of what an ISMS is making it perfect over time. Continue improvement. Implement it pragmatically, get it in place, improve your security, and then improve it over time. Okay. Templates can help a lot. But we definitely are moving into management systems, cloud solutions. If you are a complex company, I don't think you should be using templates. You should definitely be doing this in some sort of solution. If you're a small company, solutions help you a lot. Instead of managing things through spreadsheets and SharePoint and those things, but you can still do it, obviously. And the guidance thing. Obviously, this is what I do for a living, but there are a lot of people out there that are good at this, and a heck of a lot actually when you go and search for them. Well, maybe that are that good, but a lot of people that do it. But tie kicking is critical. Just have someone looking at it and going, all right, that's good, but you're missing something here. Tweak this, improve this, find a way to actually make that better. Okay, and I think that's the key message. It's not a silver bullet. Security must always be your main focus. And a lot of people that don't like ISO because they think that it's a waste of time. It's just a tick box. You should always align it to security. If you do, you get a lot of benefit out of this. And it's far bigger than, there is no such thing as a silver bullet. We do know it, all of us. We're always trying to find it. And if you're trying to find it, actually you're wasting your time. But security is your main focus.
Bevan, can you hear me?
Okay. We are, yeah.
Yeah. Quick question. Best ways to limit the scope? I think this is about a slide or so before.
It's a good question. Yeah. So the best way to limit the scope is to look at what is the objective, the most important objective of certification. And a lot of the customers that we deal with have got a client-facing scope where they are they're certifying a data center where their main customer does business with them, for example, and then putting controls around their data center. Or they're certifying a service, the service that they deal with the most customers. So if you are a customer doing, a web-based business, and you want to then focus on that specific web-based business as your scope, because that's what your customers are worried about. Or you're looking at the customer database as an example, because that's where your customers are worried, and you certify the customer database. So think about business objectives in terms of what your customers are most concerned about. And again, how do you make the most money out of it? You focus on that area. That's how you would limit the scope. And there's a whole, I do in the training, we do like a 3-hour discussion on scope sometimes, because it is so important to understand.
Yeah, someone put a comparison in there. It's not the same as PCI with scope, right? You can determine your own scope as you align it to business. Is that fair?
Totally, yeah. It's not
Cool.
the same as PCI, but if you were to, you could, as long as you can justify it. An auditor might look at it and query it if they see that, that they think you're getting it wrong, but you must be able to explain why you do it. And exactly, it's not the same as PCI. It's something based on you determining what you want to do with the scope. And then sometimes some of the scopes you've seen are almost useless, because you think, why have you done that scope? But it's fine. It works for that reason. And you can't necessarily, maybe as a customer, I could argue that I don't think that's the right scope, but they've chosen that scope for that specific reason.
Cool. Thank you,
Okay,
mate.
so we're putting something at the end. We have put out something a little bit earlier for you. So we are running specific ISO training, and there's a PIMS course in there, there's risk management. We chose 3 things which we think are the most important in terms of understanding how to do this. So if you guys are interested, or know anyone in your company is interested, Lee asked me to put this in yesterday. I wanted to do it a little bit more subtly, but I do think, guys, think about it. These courses are, honestly, I haven't met anybody that does our course that doesn't love it. These courses go down well because we have a lot of discussion. We have a lot of fun doing them, but we also learn a lot. And the privacy one is, I do think, based on some of your questions, something which is completely underestimated, underutilized, that can come to the fore a lot more. And I'm not just saying this because I want to make money out of it. I do think the PIMS angle, we as a community can do a lot more with. Bringing privacy into companies, showing the exposure, getting guys to do a lot more on it. Okay, so there's a link to the site on the website on the bottom there. If you do want to sign up or do interest in these courses, we are setting up dates now to do it for this year still, and we will do it again if there is lots of interest.
Yeah, for sure. Just to add to that, the registration will be open next week, won't it, for those courses? 3 courses towards the end of the year, the end of October, and there's 2 then running in November for whichever ones are applicable to you and your team. So I'll give you guys a nudge when that's live, okay?
Okay, brilliant. I know we really are over time because of all the delays, but is there like a last question or 2 before we go?
I don't have anything yet coming through in the chat, but I will say, guys, that Microsoft form questions related to ISO 27001, we'll keep it live for a week after this. We are consolidated an insights pack from this, just as a reference document to come back to. And if we want more sessions, I think we do need to do something on PIMS. I think it will help. So we'll keep you in the loop with that. And yeah, so there's a few things there. So the link for contributions to the insights document, or questions or queries to be included in that, will be kept live for a week up until the 21st. The registration for the training courses will be out next week. And obviously there is a consolidation afterwards, with the possible notification of a PIMS session. So yeah, ears to the ground, and I'll notify you when this recording is out. Myself and Bevan will stay on now to make sure that this uploads in accordance, and then hopefully the software will make sure that the sound and the video is aligned. Otherwise it'll just be a podcast instead of vodcast, right? But Bevan, we really appreciate the time. I know you're on the road at the moment, mate, and yeah, I really appreciate you committing to this two-part series so far. And yeah, thanks very much for everything that you do. Thanks for everyone who shared their time and contributed. It's nothing without your guidance on it, right?
Thanks,
So
everybody. Yeah.
shape everything you do with the alliances.
Thanks so much for the questions. They were very cool. And yeah, thanks a lot for everything.